Hello everyone, today we're going to be presenting a slideshow about physical health and poverty. My name is Giselle Zendejas.
My name is Jasmine Torres.
My name is Alma Ibarra Diaz.
My name is Irene Rios.
My name is Jesse Ramirez.
So, poverty affects all aspects of an individual, the most noticeable aspects being their physical development. Poverty will continue to impact an individual's physical health all throughout their life and will not stop at adulthood. It will keep affecting them until they die or until they get out of poverty. Each stage of life individuals go through are impacted differently by poverty. Today we will be researching how newborns, early childhood, middle childhood, adolescence, and adult physical health are impacted by poverty.
For several decades, our country and the world has witnessed poverty's damaging influence on child's health and development. It has been demonstrated that poverty and low birth weight are linked for several reasons. Women in poverty may be less informed about prenatal care. Low-income families may be unable to afford adequate prenatal care. The health care available to them may be of lower quality. Compared to more affluent mothers, low-income mothers consume less nutrients. As low-income individuals are generally in poor health, it is reasonable to assume that their children will be less robust than those born to healthier mothers. There is a close association between race and low birth weight. In comparison to white infants, Black infants are more than twice as likely to be underweight. The average proportion of African American mothers having low birth weight infants is 16.7%, double the level for whites at 7.4%, and nearly double the level for Latinos at 8.4%. The proportion of African American mothers who did not initiate prenatal care during the first trimester is 11.7%, tripled and nearly doubled the corresponding proportions for whites at 3.4% and Latinos at 5.9%.
Families with young children who live in poverty are at the most risk for health problems. Low-income parents are more likely to work long hours or more than one job, leaving their children alone because they cannot afford childcare or in the care of older siblings who will most likely not know how to cook, let alone prepare a meal filled with necessary nutrients. Working late hours or rarely being home leaves parents little to no time to cook healthy meals. Low-income families also lack the funds to be able to afford healthier foods, as well as access to grocery stores that provide these types of healthy foods. Energy poverty is a lack of access to electricity, meaning that a family depends on burning wood or charcoal for light and other necessities. Researchers have found that households in developing countries are the ones that struggle the most with energy poverty. They use conventional stoves that create heat and smoke. Because women and children spend the majority of their time at home, they are more prone to respiratory diseases due to all the smoke they inhale. And here's a short video of how countries are ending energy poverty.
Middle childhood is a critical time in a child's life, not only for the physical growth, but their important cognitive development. During this time, the child is heavily influenced by their environment. Anything such as family, friends, peers, or school can have an impact on them. Here's a short video before we continue going more in depth.
Bronfenbrenner's system model is, at its core, pun intended, an ecological theory, as it has been created with the intention of being applicable to reality. This is to ameliorate the critique thrown at several other psychological theories, which is that they are low in ecological validity, meaning that they are demonstrable in laboratories but aren't guaranteed to be applicable to real life. In Bronfenbrenner's model, you start at the core with the individual and all of their characteristics. From here you move out to the microsystem and so on and so forth. What's important is that all these systems interact with and affect each other. For instance, your exosystem can affect your microsystem, which in turn affects the individual, as local policies can influence your academic opportunities, which can and often will influence the individual's development.
This emphasizes the importance for schools to provide not only nutritional meals, but also to keep the children active. This also means providing positive choices outside of school also. Depending on the child's living situation, the child's physical health may be at greater risk. This is because the quality of the environment that the child has been surrounded by has a major impact on their health. Poverty affects access to things such as nutrition, medical assistance, and schooling. So this also means things such as single-parent households, unemployment, or even loss of a family member will put the child at greater risk of poverty. For example, factors such as parents always working to make ends meet, their children will only have access to things such as fast food, which will lead to future problems of obesity in their adolescent years.
Adolescents. Adolescents become less active in their teenage years compared to their middle childhoods. About 50 to 75% of obese children and adolescents will become obese adults with associated higher rates of metabolic, vascular, and musculoskeletal disease. This is due to a lack of green spaces in neighborhoods and safe places for these kids to exercise in. Only 14% of adolescents were able to identify the correct leading cause of death for men and women in the United States, which is cardiovascular disease. What this tells us is that adolescents don't have the proper education about their diets and safe exercising. Cardiovascular disease are directly linked from unhealthy diets, lack of physical inactivity, and substance use. Poverty is linked to a younger age of sexual initiation and is related to an increase in sexual risk factors compared to adolescents in higher socioeconomic statuses. Here, I'll go ahead and play a video about vaping.
When I talk to my patients, many of them talk about how they see vaping at their schools. Vaping is when someone uses a device that contains a liquid that is heated by a battery, and that vapor is inhaled into the lungs. They think that they're just flavors or water in the e-liquid, but inside the e-liquid, there are a number of chemicals which are dangerous to the body. Vaping is dangerous for youth. It contains toxic chemicals and nicotine. When youth use e-cigarettes, they're at risk for nicotine addiction. Their brains are not mature, so they are more likely to become addicted to nicotine, even with occasional or intermittent use. Nicotine exposure during adolescence affects the way the brain grows and develops, affecting learning, mood, and impulse control. When youth vape, they can have health problems, whether it's from the nicotine and nicotine addiction, or it's from lung injury. Both the FDA and the National Institutes of Health are conducting research to better understand the long-term health effects of vaping.
14% of high school students from low-income areas report repeated use of vaping. This is theorized to be due as a result of coping mechanisms from stressors and poverty and tobacco companies specifically targeting these low-income communities. California legislators have taken action to prevent and end this vaping addiction. Section SB 793 has banned the sale of flavored tobacco products in California this year, with other states taking lead as well. Since adolescents in poverty tend to spend more time at home unsupervised due to taking care of younger siblings, coming from single parent homes, and they lack the money to be able to be involved in sports and recreational activities, teens are not as active as their peers in higher socioeconomic statuses, and they're more likely to engage in risky behaviors.
In 2021, about 10.5% of adults were in poverty, and 10.3% of them were seniors. Adults who are unfortunate enough to be living in high poverty neighborhoods or areas have less access to healthy foods, medical care, experience more crime, and have poorer quality housing. Because of the less access to healthy and nutritious foods, adults could then develop diabetes, high cholesterol, they could either starve or become obese due to the lack of nutritious food or not being able to afford any food. Individuals would also be more susceptible to infections and more likely to develop life-threatening wounds due to the lack of medical care or not having enough funds to afford it. Poor quality housing can lead to pollutants in the air and uninhabitable areas, leading to health problems such as respiratory diseases or illnesses. High poverty neighborhoods have higher crime rates, and because of this, you're more likely to get shot or injured, which will severely cripple an adult's health. Although the effects of neighborhood poverty are severe on their physical health, long-term exposure to poverty has a much more negative significant impact on adult physical health as well. Because if adults are exposed to poverty for a long time, they're more likely to die from diseases, more likely to develop cardiovascular diseases and type 2 diabetes, more likely to have elevated levels of stress hormones, which are cortisol and adrenaline. These high levels of stress can lead to issues in the endocrine, immune, and metabolic system. It can also lead to heart attacks and stroke. Adults are also more likely to develop lung cancer from smoking as a way to cope with the stress. And then right now I will play a little video about poverty and the effects it has on health.
The Science on Tap series is taking a look at a very critical subject tonight. It's how poverty and discrimination can affect your health. Dr. F. Abram Franklin with the Multnomah County Health Department joins us in studio now. Welcome, doctor. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, a very important subject that you will be discussing at Science on Tap tonight. What exactly will you dive into?
Basically, the fundamental aim of the talk is or the presentation is to look at the role of race and class and how that sets up people for the opportunities for health, or the opportunities for health in a good way, or the opportunities for health in a bad way. And this sort of life course perspective on race, class, and poverty, and how that impacts outcomes.
You say Portland kind of falls in line nationally. So what do you find when you've done the research?
Mm-hmm.
How are people affected here?
Well, essentially, like similarly in other big states or metropolitan cities, race and class, poverty issues impact sort of the opportunities for resources and the opportunities, and health care being one of those resources, but not just healthcare, also education, employment, and economic opportunities. So they sort of set people up sort of where they can go and where they can't go.
Can you give us an example maybe of the difference in the healthcare available? You know, if you have something like a sore throat or an ear infection, how does what is available to those living in poverty to the rest of the population?
And that's kind of it's a big question, but it can vary. So sometimes poverty can be sort of geographically driven, and so people may not have access to primary care services, or people may have access to primary care services in terms of geography, but they may not have coverage. So again, sort of different dimensions of access. One is closed, but neither is accessible.
So it is different then from when we live in a state that's very opposite from rural Eastern Oregon to here in Multnomah County. You're saying the access
right
presents its own challenges.
Exactly. Similar.
Hey, the Science on Tap.
Poverty has multiple impacts that can be detrimental to one's well-being. People at all stages of life are affected by poverty, especially physically. As we discussed, newborns can have low birth weight. In early childhood, children can develop respiratory diseases. In middle childhood, children with low access to healthy foods can develop obesity. In adolescence, children in poverty are less active and can develop metabolic, vascular, and musculoskeletal diseases. And adults can develop diabetes and high cholesterol. These are just some examples of how poverty can have effects to the physical health of a person.
So our discussion question for this presentation is, what are the consequences from poverty on an individual's physical health at each stage of life? Discuss why.
And we hope you have a good day.